The massive crystalline hull of the Zephyrian Command Dreadnought Eternal Dominion gleamed like a jewel against the black void of space. Admiral Crixtal stood on the bridge, his tall blue form radiating the calm authority that came from 3 centuries of commanding the most powerful fleet in known space. The bridge hummed with quiet efficiency as dozens of crew members worked at their stations, monitoring the vast emptiness of the outer rim territories. A sharp chirp from the sensor station broke the peaceful routine. Sensor operator Velnix looked up from her console with confusion written across her features. "Admiral, we have an unknown contact approaching from the uncharted regions. Single vessel, configuration unknown." Crixtal moved to the tactical display with measured steps. The Zephyrian Empire had ruled this sector of space for over 3,000 years. Their territory stretched across 47 star systems, and their ships were marvels of engineering that made other species tremble with awe. The crystalline hulls could withstand the fury of dying stars. Their energy shields could deflect planet-killing weapons, and their faster-than-light drives could bend the very fabric of space to their will. "Show me," Crixtal commanded, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. The main view screen flickered to life, displaying a grainy image of what appeared to be a collection of scrap metal, held together by sheer stubbornness. The vessel looked like someone had taken parts from a dozen different ships and welded them together, without any concern for aesthetics or proper engineering. Patches of different metals covered the hull in a random pattern, and what might have been exhaust ports jutted out at odd angles. "Are we certain this is a functioning starship?" Crixtal asked, unable to hide his amazement at the primitive construction. "Confirmed, Admiral. It shows signs of active power generation and is maintaining a steady course toward our territory. The design is unlike anything in our databases." Crixtal studied the strange vessel for several moments. In all his years of service, he had never encountered anything so crude. The ship looked like it had been built in someone's backyard using spare parts and determination. Yet something about its approach bothered him. Despite its ramshackle appearance, it moved with purpose and confidence. "Open a communication channel," he ordered. The transmission crackled to life, filled with static that made several bridge officers wince. When the interference cleared, a human face appeared on the screen. The alien had pale skin, short brown hair, and wore what appeared to be a simple blue uniform with no decorative elements. He looked relaxed, almost cheerful, as if he were greeting old friends rather than facing the most powerful military force in the galaxy. "Howdy there," the human said with a casual wave. "Name's Jake Morrison, captain of the exploration vessel Pioneer's Dream. Hope we're not causing any trouble by passing through." Crixtal straightened to his full imposing height. First contact with unknown species required careful handling, but this creature's casual attitude seemed almost insulting. "I am Admiral Crixtal of the Zephyrian Imperial Fleet. You have entered sovereign territory of the Galactic Empire. State your intentions and prepare to be boarded for inspection." Jake scratched his head thoughtfully. "Well, Admiral, I appreciate the introduction, but we're not actually part of your empire. We're just humans from Earth doing a bit of exploring. We'd be happy to change course if we're in your way, but we were hoping for peaceful passage through this region." The bridge fell silent. Several officers exchanged glances of disbelief. No one spoke to an Imperial Admiral in such a casual manner, especially not while commanding what appeared to be a flying junkyard. "You will comply with Imperial law or face the consequences," Crixtal stated firmly. "Reduce power to your engines and prepare for boarding." Jake's expression remained pleasant, but something shifted in his eyes. "Now hold on there, Admiral. We haven't broken any laws that I know of, and we're not looking for trouble. How about we just agree that you folks stay on your side of the fence and we'll stay on ours?" Crixtal felt his patience wearing thin. Centuries of Imperial dominance had taught lesser species to show proper respect when faced with Zephyrian power. This human's defiance was intolerable. "You leave me no choice. Weapons, prepare a warning shot across their bow." "Yes, Admiral," replied Weapons Officer Mordex, his fingers dancing across the control interface. Plasma cannons charging. The Eternal Dominion's main weapons array began to glow with deadly energy. Plasma cannons capable of melting mountains swiveled toward the human vessel. The warning shot would demonstrate the vast technological superiority of the Empire, and surely convince this primitive species to surrender. "Firing warning shot," Mordex announced. A brilliant lance of superheated plasma streaked across space, passing close enough to the human ship to cook any unshielded crew members. but carefully aimed to avoid actual damage. The plasma bolt continued into the void, where it would eventually dissipate harmlessly. Jake Morrison watched the display of firepower with interest rather than fear. He turned to someone off-screen and said, "Well, that wasn't very neighborly. Lisa, I think our new friends want to dance." What happened next defied everything Crixtal thought he knew about physics and engineering. The ramshackle human vessel suddenly accelerated with impossible speed, moving in directions that should have torn any ship apart under the massive gravitational forces. It spun, twisted, and danced through space like a fighter craft despite being the size of a light cruiser. "Admiral," Velnix called out, her voice tight with alarm. "The human vessel is moving at velocities that should liquefy any crew inside. Their structural integrity should have failed at the first turn. But the Pioneer's dream showed no signs of structural damage. Instead, it continued its impossible ballet through space, moving closer to the Eternal Dominion with each maneuver. Then, without warning, it returned fire. What emerged from the human ship looked like simple metal projectiles, nothing more than dense rods of some unknown material. Mordex laughed at the primitive weapons. "Admiral, they're firing solid projectiles at us. Our shields will absorb the impact without difficulty." The tungsten rod struck the Eternal Dominion's energy shields and passed through them as if they didn't exist. The projectiles punched clean holes through the crystalline hull, causing several secondary explosions as they damaged internal systems. Emergency alarms began wailing throughout the ship. "Damage report," Crixtal shouted over the chaos. "Hull breaches on decks 7 through 12, came the reply from the damage control station. "We've lost 3 plasma conduits and the secondary sensor array." "How did their weapons penetrate our shields?" Crixtal stared at the tactical display in growing disbelief. The human ship had just accomplished something that should have been impossible. Zephyrian shields were based on advanced energy manipulation that could deflect any known weapon system. Yet these crude projectiles had passed through them without any apparent effort. On the communication screen, Jake Morrison's expression had grown more serious. "Admiral, we tried to be polite about this. We're not looking for a fight, but we're not going to be pushed around either. How about we call this a misunderstanding and go our separate ways?" For the first time in his long career, Admiral Crixtal found himself facing an enemy he didn't understand. The human ship looked like it had been assembled by children playing with scrap metal, yet it had just demonstrated capabilities that challenged everything he believed about space combat and technology. "Sir," Velnix said quietly, "should we request reinforcements?" Crixtal continued to stare at the human vessel as it maintained its position, somehow holding perfectly still despite having no visible thrusters or gravitational anchors. Everything about this encounter violated the natural order of things. The primitive species should have surrendered immediately when faced with Imperial might. Their crude vessel should have been destroyed by its own maneuvers. Their simple weapons should have been useless against advanced Zephyrian defenses. Yet here they were, apparently unharmed and waiting patiently for his response. "Yes," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "Alert the fleet command. Tell them we have encountered something unprecedented, and send a priority message to the Galactic Council. They need to know about this immediately." As communication officers scrambled to carry out his orders, Crixtal couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to change. The galaxy's careful balance of power, maintained for millennia by superior Zephyrian technology, suddenly seemed much less certain. The human ship continued to wait, its hull scarred and patched but somehow more threatening than the most advanced warships in the Imperial fleet. Admiral Crixtal stood in the emergency council chamber aboard the Eternal Dominion, watching as holographic images of the Galactic Council members flickered to life around the circular table. Representatives from 12 species that formed the backbone of the Empire appeared one by one, their expressions ranging from curious to annoyed at being summoned for an unscheduled meeting. High Counselor Thexmari of the Valdorian Collective spoke first, her crystalline voice carrying across the chamber. "Admiral Crixtal, your message spoke of an urgent threat requiring immediate council attention. What manner of enemy could possibly warrant such alarm?" Crixtal activated the tactical display, showing the recorded encounter with the human vessel. The council members watched in silence as the primitive-looking ship performed impossible maneuvers and penetrated Zephyrian shields with simple projectiles. When the recording ended, the chamber remained quiet for several long moments. "This must be some form of deception," declared Counselor Vexthon of the Hegemony. No vessel of such crude construction could achieve these results against Imperial technology. The sensor logs have been verified multiple times, Krixtal replied firmly. This human ship operates on principles we do not understand. Their weapons ignore our most advanced defensive systems, and their vessel performs maneuvers that should destroy any known form of construction. Meanwhile, aboard the Pioneer's Dream, engineer Lisa Parker was explaining the ship's capabilities to mechanic Pete Johnson as they worked in the cramped engine room. The space looked like organized chaos with pipes, cables, and jury-rigged components filling every available surface. Tools hung from magnetic strips and spare parts were secured in mesh containers that rattled softly with the ship's movement. See, Pete, the thing about human engineering is that we build stuff to work, not to look pretty, Lisa said as she adjusted a plasma flow regulator. This hull might look like scrap metal to those alien folks, but it's made from a titanium steel composite that actually gets stronger when it takes damage. The crystalline structure realigns under stress. Pete nodded as he checked the fusion containment field readings. And this engine design? Magnetic plasma containment with variable field geometry, Lisa explained with obvious pride. Most aliens use static containment fields that limit their maneuverability. We figured out how to reshape the magnetic bottle in real time, which lets us change direction without worrying about inertial forces tearing the ship apart. In the front of the ship, Captain Jake Morrison was reviewing star charts with navigator Carol White. The bridge was small and practical, with every surface serving multiple purposes. Control panels could be reconfigured for different functions, and backup systems were built into backup systems. How long until the next Imperial patrol finds us? Jake asked. Based on their response patterns, probably 6 hours, Carol replied. They're calling in reinforcements from the Kepler station. Looks like a full squadron this time. Jake leaned back in his chair and smiled. Well, that should be interesting. Think they'll be more polite this time around? Back on the Eternal Dominion, Admiral Krixtal received word that the Star Render Squadron was approaching. 12 of the Empire's most advanced warships, each one representing the pinnacle of Zephyrian military technology. Squadron leader Velthar commanded vessels that cost more than some planets produced in a decade, ships designed specifically to handle threats that normal Imperial forces could not manage. The Star Renders materialized from hyperspace in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming with advanced armor plating and bristling with weapon systems. Each ship was 3 times the size of the human vessel, and their combined firepower could crack a moon in half. Admiral, came Velthar's confident voice over the communication channel, we have reviewed your tactical data. While this human vessel displays unusual capabilities, overwhelming firepower should compensate for any technological surprises. We will demonstrate the futility of resisting Imperial authority. Krixtal felt a mixture of relief and uncertainty. The Star Renders had never failed in combat, their perfect coordination and superior technology making them unstoppable against any known threat. Yet something about the casual confidence of the human captain continued to bother him. The 12 Imperial warships moved into attack formation, surrounding the Pioneer's Dream at optimal firing angles. Their weapons charged simultaneously, creating a light show that would be visible from several star systems away. Energy readings spiked across all Imperial sensors as enough firepower to sterilize a continent focused on the single human vessel. Jake Morrison watched the tactical display with interest rather than concern. Well, would you look at that, Lisa? They brought some friends this time. I count 12 heavy cruisers, Lisa called from the engine room. Their energy signatures are off the charts. These folks don't mess around. Remember that modification you wanted to test? Jake asked over the intercom. The one where you said we might accidentally tear a hole in space-time? Lisa's laugh echoed through the ship. That was a joke, Captain, mostly. But if you're thinking what I think you're thinking, now would be a good time to find out if it works. Jake activated the ship-wide communication system. All hands secure for emergency maneuvers. Pete, make sure the gravitational dampeners are at maximum. Carol, plot an escape course to the asteroid field. Lisa, activate the prototype system. Acknowledged, Captain, came the replies from around the ship. Squadron leader Velthar opened a channel to the human vessel. Surrender now and you will be treated according to Imperial law. Resist and face immediate destruction. Jake's response was typically human. You know, Velthar, that's a real generous offer, but we're going to have to decline. Lisa lighted up. What happened next shattered every Imperial understanding of physics and engineering. The pioneers' dream suddenly began to blur and split, like a reflection in broken glass. Within seconds, what had been one ramshackle human vessel became 4 identical ships, each one fully functional and independently maneuvered. The Star Renders Squadron found themselves facing an enemy that had just violated the fundamental laws of matter conservation. Their perfect attack formation became useless as human vessels appeared and disappeared around them, striking from impossible angles with those devastating kinetic projectiles. How are they doing this? Velthar demanded over the squadron channel as one of his ships took critical damage. Matter cannot be duplicated. Aboard one of the 4 pioneers' dreams, Lisa was monitoring the quantum field generators with obvious satisfaction. It's not duplication, it's quantum probability manipulation, she explained to Pete. We're existing in 4 slightly different quantum states simultaneously. As long as we don't maintain it too long, we can collapse back into a single state without any paradox issues. The battle became a masterclass in unconventional tactics. The human ships didn't fight like traditional spacecraft, engaging in organized formations and exchanging broadsides. Instead, they moved like a pack of wolves, appearing from unexpected directions, striking hard, and vanishing before the Imperial ships could respond effectively. One by one, the Star Renders began to fall. Their advanced shields and armor, designed to withstand conventional energy weapons, proved useless against kinetic projectiles traveling at significant fractions of light speed. The tungsten rods punched through defensive systems like they were made of paper. Admiral Krikstal, Velthar's voice came across the communication channel, strained with disbelief and growing panic. We are taking heavy casualties. The human vessels are employing tactics and technology beyond our current understanding. Request immediate reinforcement by the home fleet. As the last of the Star Renders limped away from the battle zone, the 4 human ships converged and somehow merged back into a single vessel. The Pioneer's dream hung in space, looking no different than it had before the engagement, except for some new scorch marks on its already battered hull. Jake Morrison's voice came across all Imperial frequencies, calm and friendly as if he had just finished a pleasant conversation, rather than defeating the Empire's elite squadron. Well, that was educational. Velthar, you and your people fight real good, but you might want to work on your tactics a bit. Admiral Krikstal, we're still hoping to settle this peacefully. Maybe we could try talking instead of shooting next time. In the emergency session of the Galactic Council, panic was beginning to set in. The recorded battle data showed clearly that human technology operated on principles that defied everything that we, Empire's scientists, thought they knew about the universe. They exist in multiple quantum states, simultaneously, reported Chief Science Advisor Kelvash, his voice shaking with implications. Their weapons ignore energy-based defenses because they operate purely through kinetic force. Their ship's hull actually strengthens under combat stress. Everything about their technology challenges our fundamental understanding of physics. High Counselor Thexmari's crystalline form flickered with anxiety. How many more ships do these humans possess? Are we facing an invasion fleet? Unknown, Krikstal replied. But based on their captain's demeanor, I believe this is merely an exploration vessel. If this represents their standard technology level, we may be facing a species whose military capabilities far exceed our own. The communication relay station on Luna buzzed with activity as Admiral Susan Clark received the encrypted message from deep space. She stood in the command center overlooking Earth, watching the blue and green planet slowly rotate beneath the moon's surface. At 62 years old, she had seen humanity's first tentative steps into the galaxy. And now it seemed they had encountered their first major challenge among the stars. Ma'am, we're getting reports from Captain Morrison's mission, Communications Officer Gary Stevens said as he handed her the datapad. Looks like he's made contact with something called the Galactic Empire. Susan read through Jake's report quickly, her expression growing more serious with each line. 2 separate engagements with Imperial forces, both resulting in human victories against overwhelming odds. The Empire seemed convinced that human technology was impossible, which meant they didn't understand what they were dealing with. Get me Dr. Alex Rodriguez at the Mars Engineering Station, she ordered, and patch in Director Betty Wilson from the Earth Defense Council. We need to talk. Within minutes, the holographic forms of Earth's top military and scientific leaders appeared around the conference table. Dr. Rodriguez looked tired but alert, his gray hair disheveled from working long hours in the low-gravity environment of Mars. Director Wilson appeared calm and professional as always, her dark skin and steady gaze reflecting the confidence that had made her one of humanity's most trusted leaders. "Susan, we've been monitoring the deep space communications," Betty said immediately. "Are we looking at a potential war situation?" "Unknown at this point," Susan replied. "But based on Jake's reports, these aliens seem to think our technology is impossible. They can't understand how our ships work, which gives us a significant advantage if things go bad." Dr. Rodriguez leaned forward with interest. "That's not surprising. We've always approached engineering differently than most species we've encountered. While they seek perfection and standardization, we embrace what I like to call controlled chaos." Susan nodded toward the chief engineer. "Explain that for the council, Alex. If we're going to face a galactic empire, they need to understand why our approach works." Rodriguez activated a holographic display showing various human spacecraft designs. The ships looked like a collection of different styles and technologies, each one unique in its construction and capabilities. Human engineering philosophy is based on adaptability and redundancy. We don't build perfect ships, we build ships that can be fixed with whatever materials happen to be available. He highlighted the structural details of a typical human vessel. "Every system has 3 backups, and every backup has its own backup systems. Our hulls are designed to strengthen under stress rather than maintain perfect structural integrity. Our weapons are based on fundamental physics rather than exotic energy manipulation, which makes them nearly impossible to defend against using conventional methods." Director Wilson studied the technical specifications with growing understanding. "So when these aliens see our ships, they're not seeing advanced technology. They're seeing something that doesn't fit their understanding of how technology should work." "Exactly," Rodriguez confirmed. "They've spent thousands of years perfecting energy-based weapons and defenses. Our kinetic projectiles bypass their shields completely because they're not designed to stop simple physics. Our ships can maneuver in ways that should destroy them because we've learned to work with gravitational forces instead of fighting against them." Meanwhile, in deep space, the situation was escalating rapidly. Fleet Commander Zargoth commanded the most powerful battle group in the Imperial Navy, including 3 World Breaker-class dreadnoughts. These massive vessels were the size of small cities, armed with weapons capable of sterilizing entire continents. His fleet consisted of over 200 ships, representing the combined military might of a dozen different species. Captain Jake Morrison watched the approaching Imperial Armada from the bridge of the Pioneer's Dream, now joined by 2 other human vessels that had arrived in response to his earlier requests for support. The Lucky Strike, commanded by Captain Helen Ross, was a converted cargo hauler that had been modified for long-range exploration. The Stubborn Mule, under Captain Rick Davis, started life as a mining vessel before being equipped with defensive systems and scientific equipment. "That's a lot of ships," observed Navigator Carol White as she studied the sensor readings. "I count over 200 vessels, including some really big ones." Jake scratched his chin thoughtfully. "Well, they certainly don't believe in doing things halfway. Helen, Rick, you folks ready for this?" "Born ready," came Helen's voice over the communication channel. "The Lucky Strike might not look like much, but she's got some surprises tucked away." Rick's gravelly voice followed. "The Stubborn Mule's been itching for a real test. These alien folks picked the wrong humans to mess with." Fleet Commander Zargoth opened a channel to the human vessels, his voice carrying the authority of countless military victories. "Human ships, you are vastly outnumbered and outgunned. Surrender immediately, and your crews will be treated according to Imperial law. Resistance will result in your complete destruction." Jake looked around the bridge at his crew, seeing the same determined expression on every face that had carried humanity from a single planet to the stars. "Well, folks, looks like we tried to be polite, but they're not interested in conversation. Time to show them what happens when you back humans into a corner." He activated the general communication channel, broadcasting to all 3 human ships. "All vessels, this is Morrison. We tried to be neighborly, but these folks seem determined to start a fight. Let's show them what human ingenuity looks like when we're properly motivated." The response from the human ships was immediate and devastating in its creativity. Instead of engaging in traditional fleet combat, they scattered in 3 different directions, forcing the Imperial fleet to divide its attention and firepower. The Lucky Strike began broadcasting false sensor signatures, creating the illusion of dozens of additional human vessels. The stubborn mule released a cloud of metallic chaff that interfered with Imperial targeting systems while simultaneously launching a barrage of electronic warfare attacks. The pioneers did something that made Fleet Commander Zargoth question his understanding of reality. The ship somehow split into multiple quantum states again. But this time each duplicate began broadcasting different radio frequencies, creating a cacophony of signals that overwhelmed Imperial communication systems. "Sir, we're being jammed across all frequencies," reported the fleet's communication officer. "The humans are using some form of adaptive signal processing that counters our encryption algorithms in real time." Zargoth watched in growing alarm as his perfectly coordinated fleet began to fall apart. Imperial ships were designed to operate as a unified force, sharing targeting data and coordinating their attacks through sophisticated network systems. The human electronic warfare attacks didn't just jam their communications, they turned their own coordination systems against them. "How are they penetrating our secured networks?" demanded the fleet's tactical officer. The answer came from an unexpected source. Chief Technology Analyst Morvex had been studying the human electronic attacks and made a disturbing discovery. "Commander, they're not using sophisticated hacking programs. They're using simple viruses that exploit our standardized codebase. Because all Imperial ships use identical software, a single virus can affect the entire fleet simultaneously." Fleet Commander Zargoth felt his confidence beginning to crack. The humans weren't fighting like any enemy he had ever encountered. They didn't engage in honorable ship-to-ship combat or follow any recognizable tactical doctrine. Instead, they treated warfare like an engineering problem to be solved through creativity and improvisation. The human ships began using the debris from their own electronic warfare attacks as improvised weapons. Metallic chaff was repurposed into kinetic projectiles. Communication jammers were turned into guided missiles, and even their own exhaust signatures were weaponized to blind Imperial sensors. "Sir, the humans are adapting their tactics faster than we can respond," reported the tactical officer. "Every time we adjust our defenses, they find a new way to attack us." Captain Helen Ross demonstrated the human approach to problem-solving when her ship's main engine was damaged by Imperial fire. Instead of withdrawing from combat, she rerouted power from life support systems to create an improvised weapon that fired concentrated bursts of charged particles. The Lucky Strike became a mobile artillery platform, striking Imperial ships from unexpected angles. Captain Rick Davis took a different approach when the stubborn mule lost its primary weapons. He began ramming smaller Imperial vessels, using his ship's reinforced mining hull as a battering ram. Each collision disabled an enemy ship, while his vessel's adaptive armor plating absorbed the impact damage and actually became stronger. "Admiral," came a panicked voice from one of the Imperial destroyers, "the human vessels are using our own debris as weapons. They're turning everything into a projectile." Fleet Commander Zargoth realized with growing horror that the humans didn't just build ships to fight wars. They built crews that could turn anything into a weapon. Their engineering teams were performing. The Imperial Palace on Zephyria Prime had stood for 5,000 years, its crystalline spires reaching toward the stars as a symbol of eternal dominance. Emperor Voxthul sat upon his throne in the Great Hall, surrounded by the holographic images of his most trusted advisors and military commanders. The massive chamber echoed with urgent voices as reports poured in from across the Empire about the human threat. Counselor Thexmari's voice carried a note of desperation that had never been heard in these halls before. "Your Imperial Majesty, the humans have now defeated 3 separate Imperial fleets. Their casualties remain minimal, while our losses mount with each engagement. Our military doctrine appears completely ineffective against their unconventional tactics." Emperor Voxthul was ancient even by Zephyrian standards, having ruled the Empire for over 8 centuries. His crystalline form pulsed with the deep blue light that marked the oldest and most powerful of his species. Never in his long reign had he faced a threat that could not be overcome through superior technology and overwhelming force. "Show me the battle recordings again," he commanded, his voice resonating through the chamber with absolute authority. The holographic display filled the center of the hall, showing the most recent engagement where 3 human vessels had somehow defeated Fleet Commander Zargoth's armada of over 200 ships. The Emperor watched in growing disbelief as the ramshackle human craft performed impossible maneuvers, used debris as weapons, and somehow shared resources between vessels in the middle of combat. Their ships repair themselves during battle, reported Chief Military Analyst Kexvaran. They appear to have automated systems that can weld hull breaches, reroute damaged systems, and even reconstruct destroyed components using salvaged materials. Most disturbing of all, they seem to improve their capabilities with each engagement. And their weapons continue to ignore our defensive systems, added Defense Minister Volthax. Our shields are useless against simple kinetic projectiles traveling at relativistic speeds. Our armor, designed to withstand energy weapons, provides no protection against basic physics. Emperor Voxthul rose from his throne, his towering form casting long shadows across the chamber. Prepare the galaxy's end for immediate departure. If these humans wish to challenge imperial authority, they will face the full might of the Empire's most powerful weapon. Meanwhile, on Earth, news of the galactic conflict had reached the general public through carefully managed information releases. Rather than panic, the reaction was typically human. A mixture of excitement, curiosity, and the irrepressible urge to rise to any challenge. Shipyards across the solar system began working around the clock as civilian contractors, volunteered their expertise and resources. Captain Jenny Martinez stood in the main assembly bay of the Ceres Station shipyard, watching as dozens of vessels took shape under the skilled hands of human engineers and technicians. The ships represented everything that made human technology unique. Each one was different, built according to the specific vision of its design team, yet all shared the fundamental principles of adaptability and resilience. Martinez, "Your ship's ready for final inspection," called Chief Engineer Dan Cooper as he emerged from beneath the hull of a vessel that defied easy classification. The craft looked like someone had crossed a racing yacht with a mobile fortress, its sleek lines interrupted by weapon hardpoints and sensor arrays. "What are you calling this one, Dan?" Jenny asked as she examined the unusual design. "The Wild Card," Dan replied with obvious pride. "She's got racing engines from the Jupiter circuit, mining lasers modified for combat, and hull plating salvaged from a destroyed orbital habitat. Plus a few surprises I'd rather keep secret until we need them." Across the shipyard, similar scenes were playing out as human ingenuity tackled the challenge of preparing for interstellar warfare. Retired military personnel worked alongside civilian engineers. Racing enthusiasts contributed high-performance engines, and mining companies provided industrial equipment that could be weaponized. Commander Tony Kim supervised the conversion of his former mining vessel Iron Will into a combat craft capable of supporting a small fleet. The ship's massive cargo holds had been redesigned to serve as mobile repair bays, ammunition storage, and even temporary crew quarters for damaged vessels. "Tony, we've got volunteer crews signing up faster than we can process them," reported his executive officer, Lieutenant Sarah Walsh. "Engineers, pilots, technicians, even some college students who want to help with maintenance." Tony smiled as he watched a group of teenagers installing additional computer cores in the ship's navigation center. "That's what I love about humans. Sarah, tell us something's impossible and we'll find 3 different ways to prove you wrong." The response fleet that assembled at the Sol system's edge was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Where other species built standardized fleets from identical templates, the human armada looked like a collection of every shipyard experiment and engineering dream that had ever been conceived. Military vessels flew alongside converted cargo ships, racing craft modified for combat, and experimental designs that existed purely because someone wanted to see if their ideas would work. Captain Jenny Martinez commanded a squadron of volunteer vessels that included everything from a converted passenger liner to a prototype stealth fighter. Her flagship Wildcard was joined by the Lightning Bug, a ship so fast it could barely be tracked by conventional sensors, and the Patchwork, a vessel that had been assembled entirely from spare parts but somehow outperformed ships, costing 10 times as much. Commander Tony Kim led what the fleet jokingly called the Misfit Squadron, ships that had been rejected by military procurement but found new life in the hands of creative engineers. The Iron Will was accompanied by the Never Say Die, a ship that had been destroyed and rebuilt so many times that its original design was no longer recognizable, and the Murphy's Law, a vessel specifically designed to turn mechanical failures into tactical advantages. As the human fleet prepared for departure, Admiral Susan Clark addressed the assembled crews through a general communication channel. Her image appeared on screens throughout the Armada, showing a woman who had dedicated her life to pushing the boundaries of human achievement. "People of Earth, we didn't ask for this fight, but we're not going to back down from it either," she began, her voice carrying the quiet confidence that had made her one of humanity's most respected leaders. "Out there is an empire that thinks we're just another primitive species to be conquered or destroyed. They're about to learn what happens when you underestimate human determination." She paused, looking out at the assembled fleet with obvious pride. "We're not the biggest, we're not the most advanced, and we certainly don't have the prettiest ships. But we've got something they don't understand. We've got each other, and we've got the willingness to turn every setback into an opportunity." In deep space, Emperor Voxthul's personal command ship, Galaxy's End, emerged from hyperspace with an escort of the Empire's most elite vessels. The super dreadnought was a marvel of engineering that dwarfed entire space stations, its hull constructed from crystallized dark matter and armed with weapons that could crack planets. The ship represented the absolute pinnacle of Imperial technology, a vessel so powerful that its very presence in a star system could force entire civilizations to surrender. "Your Majesty," reported Fleet Admiral Kex Thalar, "our scouts have detected the approach of a large human fleet. Preliminary counts suggest approximately 300 vessels of various configurations." Emperor Voxthul studied the tactical display with interest rather than concern. The human ships looked even more primitive than the vessels that had somehow defeated his previous fleets. Many appeared to be converted civilian craft, and their formations showed none of the precise coordination that marked professional military forces. "They bring children's toys to face the might of the Empire," he said dismissively. "This ends now. Signal the fleet to attack positions. We will demonstrate the futility of resisting Imperial authority." The Galaxy's End began charging its primary weapon system, a gravitational disruptor capable of tearing apart the molecular bonds of entire starships. Around it, hundreds of Imperial vessels moved into perfect attack formations, their combined firepower sufficient to sterilize multiple star systems. Captain Jake Morrison, now commanding the combined human fleet from the bridge of the Pioneer's Dream, watched the approaching Imperial Armada with the same calm expression he had worn during his first encounter with Zephyrian forces. Beside him, Admiral Clark coordinated the human response through a communication network that linked every ship in the fleet. "All vessels, this is Clark," she announced over the general channel. "Remember, we don't fight like they do. We don't need perfect formations or standardized tactics. Every ship out there represents the best of human innovation and the spirit that carried us from a single world to the stars." The human fleet began to spread out in what appeared to be a disorganized scatter pattern, but was actually a carefully orchestrated dance of mutual support and overlapping fields of fire. Ships that looked like they had been built in someone's garage took positions alongside vessels representing the cutting edge of human technology. "Admiral," Jake said quietly, "the Kepler 442 system had been chosen as the battleground because it contained nothing but empty space and a few worthless asteroids. Emperor Voxthul wanted to ensure that when he destroyed the human fleet, there would be witnesses across the galaxy to see the Empire's absolute power." The Galaxy's End hung in space like a dark moon, its massive bulk surrounded by over 10,000 Imperial vessels representing every species that served the Empire. Admiral Susan Clark stood on the bridge of the Pioneer's Dream, now serving as the flagship for the human fleet. Around her, the crew worked with the quiet efficiency that had carried humanity from a single planet to the stars. The tactical display showed the approaching Imperial Armada, a force so large that it blotted out entire sections of Starfield. "Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from the Imperial flagship," reported Communications Officer Gary Stevens. "Put it through," Susan replied, her voice calm despite facing odds that would have terrified any reasonable military commander. Emperor Voxthul's ancient form appeared on the main screen, his crystalline features radiating the absolute confidence of 8 centuries of unchallenged rule. "I am Emperor Voxthul, sovereign of the Galactic Empire and master of 10,000 worlds. You humans have proven more troublesome than anticipated, but this ends now. Surrender unconditionally and your species will be allowed to exist as subjects of the Empire." Susan looked around the bridge at her crew, seeing the same determined expression on every face that had driven humanity to explore dangerous oceans, climb impossible mountains, and reach for distant stars. "Your Majesty, I'm Admiral Susan Clark of the Human Space Fleet. We appreciate the offer, but we're going to have to decline. We didn't come this far just to kneel to someone else. The Emperor's form flickered with displeasure. Then you have chosen extinction. Witness the price of defying Imperial authority. The galaxy's end began to glow with malevolent energy as its primary weapon system charged. The gravitational disruptor was designed to tear apart the molecular bonds of entire fleets, a weapon so powerful that it had never been used in actual combat. Around it, thousands of Imperial ships moved into perfect attack formations, their combined firepower representing the military might of half the galaxy. Captain Jake Morrison, coordinating the human response from his position near the asteroid field, opened a general communication channel to the entire human fleet. All ships, this is Morrison. We've tried talking. We've tried being neighborly, and these folks just don't seem interested in peaceful coexistence. Time to show them what humans do when we're backed into a corner. The human fleet began to move, but not in any formation that Imperial tacticians could recognize. Instead of maintaining rigid battle lines, the ships scattered like a flock of birds, each vessel following its own path while somehow maintaining perfect coordination with the whole. Ships that looked like they had been assembled from spare parts took positions alongside cutting-edge military vessels, creating a chaotic pattern that defied traditional tactical analysis. Captain Jenny Martinez commanded her squadron of volunteer ships from the bridge of the Wild Card, watching as Imperial vessels tried to target the seemingly random human movements. All Wild Card squadron ships remember what we practiced. Don't fight their fight, make them fight ours. The lightning bug suddenly accelerated to impossible speeds, appearing and disappearing across the battlefield like a ghost. The patchwork began broadcasting false sensor signatures, creating the illusion of dozens of additional ships. The Murphy's Law did something that made Imperial sensors malfunction simply by existing in the same general area. Commander Tony Kim led his misfit squadron in a completely different approach. The Iron Will opened its massive cargo bays and began deploying what appeared to be space debris, but was actually a carefully planned minefield of improvised weapons. The Never Say Die started broadcasting on Imperial communication frequencies, not to jam them but to offer helpful suggestions about their tactical formations. Emperor Voxthul watched the human response with growing confusion. "What are they doing? This is not military doctrine." "Your Majesty," replied Fleet Admiral Kexthaler, "they appear to be treating this as some form of elaborate game rather than a serious military engagement." The battle began in earnest when the galaxy's end fired its gravitational disruptor at what appeared to be the largest concentration of human ships. The weapon's energy tore through space itself, creating a zone of destruction that should have eliminated dozens of enemy vessels. Instead, the beam passed harmlessly through empty space as the human ship somehow anticipated the attack and moved away moments before it fired. "Impossible," Emperor Voxthul declared. "No species can predict gravitational disruption patterns." Aboard the Pioneer's Dream, Engineer Lisa Parker was monitoring the Imperial weapon systems with obvious fascination. "Captain, their big gun works by creating localized gravitational anomalies. Once you understand the physics, it's actually pretty easy to predict where the effect will manifest." "And you figured this out how?" Admiral Clark asked. "Same way we figure out everything else," Lisa replied with a grin. "We experimented until we understood it, then we built something better." The human counterattack began with what appeared to be simple kinetic projectiles, but these weapons had been modified with human ingenuity. Some projectiles split into multiple warheads mid-flight, others changed direction using tiny maneuvering thrusters, and a few carried electronic warfare packages that infected Imperial computer systems with adaptive viruses. The Imperial fleet's perfect formations began to break down as human attacks struck from unexpected angles. Ships designed to operate as a unified whole found their coordination networks compromised by viruses that turned their own systems against them. Weapons that had never failed in thousands of years of service suddenly began malfunctioning when targeted by electronic attacks they had never been designed to resist. "Sir, the humans are using our own tactical doctrine against us," reported the Imperial tactical officer. "They're studying our formation patterns in real time and exploiting weaknesses we didn't know existed." But the real turning point came when the human ships began demonstrating their most remarkable capability, the ability to work together in ways that transcended traditional military thinking. When the lightning bug's engines were damaged by Imperial fire, 3 other ships immediately moved to assist, physically linking their power systems to share energy. When the Patchwork's weapons were destroyed, nearby vessels began feeding it ammunition through improvised transfer systems. Captain Jenny Martinez watched as her entire squadron began operating as a single organism, ships sharing resources, crew members, and even structural components in the middle of combat. "This is what they don't understand about humans," she said over the communication channel. "We don't just build ships, we build communities." The human ships began using battlefield debris in ways that horrified Imperial observers. Destroyed enemy vessels became improvised weapons, their wreckage guided by small maneuvering thrusters into remaining Imperial formations. Damaged human ships were stripped for parts by their fellows, their useful components redistributed across the fleet while their crews transferred to other vessels. "They're cannibalizing their own ships," reported the Imperial censor operator with undisguised shock, "and somehow making themselves stronger in the process." Emperor Voxthal watched his seemingly invincible fleet crumble before an enemy that treated warfare like an engineering problem to be solved. Through creativity and cooperation, the galaxy's end itself came under attack when human boarding parties, led by Marine Sergeant Carl Thompson, used improvised breaching pods to penetrate the super dreadnought's hull. "How did they get through our shields?" demanded the Emperor. "They didn't go through them, Your Majesty," replied a panicked crew member. "They somehow synchronized their approach with our shield rotation cycle and slipped through during the microsecond gaps between field realignments." Sergeant Thompson led his Marines through the alien corridors with the same practical approach that characterized all human engineering. They didn't try to understand Imperial technology. They simply found its weakest points and exploited them. Critical systems were overloaded with feedback loops. Command centers were isolated by cutting power conduits, and weapons arrays were turned against the ship's own hull. "Your Majesty," came a voice from the ship's bridge, "the humans have taken control of our primary weapons array. They're targeting our own escort vessels." Emperor Voxthal felt something he had never experienced in 8 centuries of rule: the cold touch of defeat. His most powerful weapon had been turned against him by an enemy that refused to fight according to any recognizable rules of warfare. The battle ended not with surrender, but with exhaustion. The Imperial fleet, or what remained of it, found itself scattered across the system, their ships damaged, their crews demoralized, and their tactical doctrine proven useless against human unpredictability. Admiral Susan Clark opened a communication channel to the captured galaxy's end, which her crews had already renamed Second Chance. "Your Majesty, I think it's time we had a serious conversation about the future." The negotiation that followed took place aboard the captured super dreadnought, with Emperor Voxthal facing